Welcome, everybody. We will start the annual meeting in just a minute or two, and we're going to give folks a chance to gather. We're glad that you're here. If you're watching live on YouTube, you are encouraged to join us in the Zoom webinar so that we can see your comments and hear from you. I've posted a link to the annual meeting page on our church's website in the chat of the YouTube video. So find that or find it on our church's website and navigate over to the Zoom webinar so that we can hear directly from you. It's 10 o'clock, but we'll give people a minute or two more to join us, but I'm glad that you're with us already. To answer your question, and I think that's either Samantha or Samantha. Yes, there are plenty of people on. So I trust that the link works. Let me, oh no, well, it might work. Hold on, Samantha, thank you for asking. Let me check and see if I can confirm that that link works. Welcome, everybody, to our annual meeting. We're still waiting for people to show up, and we're going to give them plenty of time. I see about 30 or so people, households in the Zoom meeting, and I'm glad that you're here. You might be watching live on YouTube. You can watch, but in order to share your comments or your questions, I hope that you'll navigate over to the Zoom webinar. The best way to communicate with me is using the Q&A feature. And I see that Rebecca says that the link from the website is working. Robin also suggests that she had the link worked and she's got her sound working now. So I'm pretty sure the link is working. I had trouble, Samantha, with it as well because it asked me to sign in. It didn't recognize me at first, which is the first time I've ever had that challenge. But anyway, for what it's worth, I think the link is working. We're up to about 35 people. Let me say again, if you're watching on YouTube, I really hope you'll follow the link to the Zoom webinar. If you're on the Zoom webinar, the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen almost certainly is the best way to share your questions or your comments. When it's time for us to do some voting, I'll ask primarily for no votes to come through the Q&A feature. But if you're watching on YouTube, I won't be able to see that real time. I won't be able to respond to that. Of course, if you're watching YouTube and you have questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to me or to any member of the vestry after our annual meeting and share those comments with us. But in order for us to hear them and respond to them during the meeting, I hope that you'll navigate over to the Zoom webinar using the link provided in the chat. You can also find that link on our website. The link in the communicate is also working. Thank you, Susan. We'll give people a minute or two more. There are a couple of individuals that I've asked to make presentations. And when it's time for you to make a presentation, I will make you a panelist, and then you'll be able to start your video and start your audio. And we might have to work a little bit to figure that out. But if you are one of the few people who's going to give a presentation during the annual meeting, then stay tuned for that. I'll make you that presenter, that panelist, and then you'll be able to share your screen. So I hope that answers that question. Thank you. We're gonna run a little slower than normal because of the technological feature and because we don't have an 11 o'clock service. So we can stay here all day answering questions and talking about the budget if you would like, haha. But we will take our time. We will make sure that technology doesn't stand in the way of us sharing with one another. It is 10:05, and there are a number of people with us now, about 36 screens logged in, and I'm sure others watching on YouTube. Let's begin. I call to order this annual meeting for St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Let us start with a prayer. Gracious God, you are with us, even when we are apart, especially when we are apart. Hold us together, closer than we have ever been by the gift of your Spirit. Let us know your love that moves through us, that is breathed into us, and that keeps us united to one another and to you. Guide us in this annual meeting. Help the work that we do be work that is good and pleasing in your sight, work that is edifying for your church and for your world. And help this be a time to remember that we are always in your sight. Bring an end to this pandemic. Bring it soon. Help us be careful and responsible to care for one another, even for those whom we do not know. And speed the day when we are able to break bread together in one another's company. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. So you've heard it a couple of times now, and I'm probably going to say it 3 or 4 more times, and I hope you'll forgive me. But because our meeting is a virtual meeting, I will remind you all how good it is to join the Zoom webinar instead of just watching on YouTube. If you're on the Zoom webinar, the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen is the best way to share questions or comments. If you're on the YouTube, you can leave the comments, but I won't see them until the meeting is over. So I hope you'll follow us over to the Zoom webinar, and the link is provided in the chat. Also, normally we would all be in the parish hall together. And so when we vote, we can see or hear the result of that vote very quickly. Unfortunately, because of a virtual connection, we need to be a little more patient and to give people a chance to express their vote. Most of the time in our annual meeting, votes are overwhelmingly in the affirmative. However, it's important that as we conduct this meeting, we make space, especially for anyone who would like to vote no when it is time for us to elect the vestry, when it's time for us to adjourn. And because the technology requires a little bit of a delay, you might hear me pausing for a substantial amount of time just to make sure that everyone who has a desire to express themselves has had that opportunity. And again, the Q&A feature is the best way to do that. But we'll slow everything down a little bit to make sure that everybody has a chance to stay tuned. Here in the parish hall with me are Mac Mayfield and Dave McMath. They're present physically, so it's not just me in the room, but of course we also know that we are together virtually, and we've got some experience with that now. The first order of business before us is to say thank you, and to say thank you especially to our outgoing vestry members. I am grateful, and I know that you are grateful for the years of hard and faithful service that the members of this vestry have shared with us at St. Paul's. I'm grateful to Lindsay Childers, our outgoing senior warden, for her time and her care. I'm also grateful to David Clay and Malcolm Hayward and Phil Keene for their leadership these 3 years. I'm grateful to Channing Smith, who has been an excellent clerk this year, and all of them are rolling off the vestry, and they deserve our thanksgiving. If they were here, we would stand and applaud and express that, and I hope they can feel from me and from all of us gathered virtually how grateful we are for your willingness to serve in that capacity. That's the first vestry class, or I should say the last vestry class that was present through the transition from rectors. So they've been through a whole lot, and I'm grateful for their patience and their persistence through it all. Thank you to those members of the vestry. The second order of business for us is to elect a new vestry class. There are 4 nominees that have been chosen by the parish. Let me remind you how that process works. In St. Paul's, we choose to nominate individuals, and we nominate them through a balloting process. Anyone who is eligible to serve is invited to be on the ballot, and then the parish votes, usually in successive weeks, until 4 individuals have received a majority of votes on each of the ballots that have been cast, the ballot when they are elected. This year, because of the pandemic, the vestry chose to hold that election electronically, though we did have a few people come to the church and turn in a ballot in print, which is helpful to know. And during that process, the parish has officially selected and nominated 4 individuals to serve on the vestry. Let me share my screen so that you can see and remember who those 4 individuals are. Mariah Allen, Connor Eldridge, Michael Holloman, and Jeremy Oxford. Those 4 individuals have been nominated by the parish in order to serve on the vestry. We will presumably elect them in a moment, but first, are there any other nominations for a 3-year term on the vestry? If there are, please use the Q&A feature to let me know that you have a nomination to make. And I'm going to pause for a moment and give you plenty of time to respond. And any of the parliamentarians out there, I hope you will forgive us if we have to go back and do something a little out of order, because we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to express themselves without us pushing through too quickly. So are there any other nominations for a 3-year term on the vestry? I don't see any. Given that I don't see any, is there a nomination? Is there a motion that nominations cease? Mac Mayfield makes that motion. Is there a second? And what do you know? Dave McMath seconds that motion. That motion is not debatable, so we will vote. You do not need to share your yes or your aye vote using the Q&A. I will presume that the majority of the parish will say together, not only those people in the room, but all of you in your homes, aye when it is called for. However, if you have a no vote, please express that no vote using the Q&A so that we can respond to that accordingly. The motion before us is to cease nominations. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say and share using Q&A no. We'll pause for a moment to give people a chance to respond. I don't see or hear any no's, so the motion to close nominations carries. There are 4 people who have been nominated for 4 spots. Because of that, it is appropriate that we would vote for all 4 of them by acclamation. All those in favor of electing Mariah Allen, Connor Eldridge, Michael Holloman, and Jeremy Oxford to a 3-year term on the vestry, please say aye. All those opposed, please say and type in no. We'll give people a chance. I don't see any no's, so the motion carries. Thank you to those 4 individuals for their willingness to serve, and thank you also to all of those who are willing to be nominated, and we hope that you will consider running again next year. The vestry has chosen as its senior and junior warden, Mac Mayfield, who will take over as senior warden as soon as this meeting is finished, and Linda Jones has been elected by the vestry to serve as the junior warden. At our first meeting in about a month, we anticipate that the vestry will choose Peter Elzer to serve as the vestry clerk, and we'll again choose Dave McMath to serve as the parish treasurer, but stay tuned for those. Thank you again for all those who are willing to serve. Now it's time to hear some reports. Let me draw your attention first to the annual report section of the website. It's the page that I was looking at a minute ago, and you can see the URL at the top of your screen is stpaulsfay.org/annual meeting. And here on the annual meeting page, you'll see every report individually tabbed: a rector's report, treasurer's report, a warden's report, children's formation, and the rest. If you would like to see all of the reports together, at the top of the screen, you can download the traditional PDF of that report, and we'll leave that available on the website for this year. So if you want a chance to review that carefully, you certainly may do so. During this portion of the annual meeting, we anticipate that I will make a report, and then the treasurer will make a report. After that, I will ask Greg Lee to report on behalf of our endowment committee. Finally, Mac Mayfield, our rising senior warden, will make a report, and then we'll ask if there's any other business for us to conduct today. So let's start with my report. I'm not going to read, of course, to you what is in print, but I'll say to you a little bit about what life has been like at St. Paul's, and it's been a lot like what life, I'm sure, has been like for each of you, tinged with sadness and loss, filled with longing, a pining for those we love, for our church, and for the chance to gather together. Although our adaptation to the pandemic did not begin until late March, which means we had almost a quarter of the year without any pandemic operation. So full and requiring of our focus has COVID-19 been that it's hard for me to even remember what life in our church was like back in January, February, and March. As I prepared for my report and looked back at our service register, where every service and the attendance at all the services are recorded, it stirred me deeply to remember that not that long ago, we had 450 people in church every Sunday. We're at 10. We have 10 people who are able to gather in church because we're not able to have any in-person gatherings right now. Let me say a little bit about that and also about our plans for the future. The staff meets every week, and every week we discuss what does it take for us to reopen with outdoor offerings and to reopen with indoor offerings. And we try to make sure that we are navigating that very difficult balance of modeling safety and caring for each other and for those around us, but also pursuing eagerly the opportunity to be back together again. A church in its infancy, in the very earliest days of our church, physical presence and physical sacrament are essential to our identity. And those are things that we have lost, and we yearn to come back. I bet, like me, you are not satisfied with how things have gone. We aren't happy with the fact that we can't come back together. We trust ourselves to be safe, to wear a mask, to keep distant. And still, in the aggregate, we have had to hold back from that, to not pursue that fully. Some of the data and some of the direction that have gone into those decisions are not only the wisdom of our staff, and the staff is a pretty wise group, also some medical professionals on the vestry and in the parish, health officials in this county and throughout the state, the CDC as well, but in particular, the diocesan guidelines. The bishop has issued some guidelines. Let me remind you what those are. The bishop asks that we not have any indoor gatherings at all until the number of active cases in our community is 14 active cases per 10,000 people or below. So when our active case rate in Washington County or in Fayetteville is 14 per 10,000 or below, the bishop thinks it's okay for us wearing masks, keeping physical distance, etc., to gather in person indoors. He asks us to suspend even outdoor gatherings until the active case rate is below 35 per 10,000 people. You might know that in Fayetteville right now, the active case is about 90 per 10,000 people, so almost 3 times what the maximum that has been set for us for even outdoor gatherings. and about 7 times more than what is available for indoor gatherings, which is a cause for great sadness. Also, a reminder of the importance of wearing our masks. Here at St. Paul's, we've also named that the positive test rate is something we consider. And so we've taken the bishop's guidelines and we've adapted them slightly and said that as long as our active caseload is steady or declining for at least 2 weeks, and when our percentage of positive cases, PCR cases, is below 10%, then we begin to implement gatherings, outdoor gatherings, if weather permits. There's not a lot of that right now. And eventually, as it continues to decline and more time goes by, indoor gatherings. I remember in the spring, March and April, imagining that by the 4th of July, we would be back together. It is now January, a full 6 months beyond the 4th of July. We're still not back together. We had 2 wonderful, glorious weeks of in-person outdoor worship, which I hope you remember and enjoyed. We had a Christmas Eve service where individuals were able to come and receive communion in person, but in a strange way and not a full way for us to be together. My hope is that we would be able to gather again soon. At this point, I will be surprised if we are able to have indoor worship by Easter. And I think it's going to take longer than that. My expectation, though, is that by the end of the spring semester, as we move into the summer, that we would begin to have, as vaccinations continue and expand, as people learn to take necessary precautions, as that case rate and those positive tests go down, that we would be able to resume some outdoor and maybe even some indoor activities by the end of the summer. And maybe by September, or perhaps even a little earlier as the fall semester starts, that we'd be able to resume some operations that resemble what we call normality. We might be wearing masks for a long time, but that's the kind of timeline I have in mind. But again, every single week, we look at those numbers and we ask ourselves, what can we do to come back together again? At this point, that's our top operational and logistical priority. And we try to conform everything that we can in terms of worship, outreach, formation, pastoral care, parish life. We try to conform all of that to our greatest hope and expectations that we will be able to come back soon, but there are certainly limits there. If you have questions or comments about that, you are welcome to share them using the Q&A feature. You can share them anytime. They won't interrupt me, but when I get to a pausing point, I'll look at them and answer as is appropriate. So if you've got questions, by all means, do share them using the Q&A feature. I hope you've noticed that worship carries on, though in a strange way, a limited way. We continue to have the daily office, Monday through Friday, morning and evening prayer. We continue to have Sunday morning worship at 8:45, which you can watch, of course, at any other time during the week. Special services, Christmas services, Lent and Holy Week will be coming up soon. We will continue our pattern of offering evensong services on Sunday evenings. Holy Week will again be a strange exploration for us, but I look forward to being on that journey with you, and even more so looking forward to being on that journey in person, hopefully soon. I hope you've noticed that our formation offerings have not only been sustained, but have actually grown. We do more for adult, children, and youth formation than we typically have, even though we can't do those things in person. And we recognize that many of us have had enough virtual meetings. We've had enough Zooms. So we're offering asynchronous opportunities for our children, for our youth, and for our families. And so we've not only sustained, but we've grown and we've adapted in several ways. Coming up, our vocations conference starting next week is a good example of ways that we are offering the richness of our church, of our tradition, and of our relationships that we aren't holding back during the pandemic. We're actually pushing more in those ways. Outreach similarly has grown and adapted. We gave away more money in 2020 to people in need than we have, I would be willing to bet, ever, but certainly in recent memory. We gave a lot of money away. We recognize that many of the institutional relationships that we have had and many of the programs that we would normally offer were scaled back. And so we offered a lot of direct aid. We wrote a lot of checks to individuals, but we also wrote checks to a few targeted organizations who were able to offer direct aid to people who are facing eviction, people who are facing bills that can't be met, people who need food on the table, transportation expenses. So we gave a lot of money away because that's what it meant for us to be faithful to God and faithful to the needs of our community. Thank you for your generosity. So we've grown in formation, we've grown in our outreach. One way that we have not grown, one way that we have struggled is parish life. And a part of that parish life is pastoral care. So much of what I do to help care for people in our community depends upon seeing them. Even if we don't say a word, but when I see you in church, I'm able to, even in an instant, remember what's going on in your life and to tell in an instant, as you would as well, when you see a familiar face, to tell how that person is doing and whether a follow up is needed. In this season where I see so few of you, I'm having a hard time staying in touch. I'm having a hard time. Phone calls are fine, but they're not full and they're not good enough. Pastoral care is something that we recognize we will never be able to do well enough, and it's particularly difficult during the pandemic. And I'm sorry for that. There's an aching that I feel, and I bet you feel it too. I would ask you to do me and the community a favor, if you would. If you have a personal need or if someone you know is in need, please, please, please let me or Suzanne know. Reach out to us by phone, by email, by text, by carrier pigeon, whatever it takes for you to share with us the needs that you know of. There are about 1,300 households in our church. It's impossible for us to stay in touch with all 1,300 of those households, though we try pretty hard. Things are going to fall through the cracks. Normally, I would be able to see you and respond to those needs as they present themselves. Normally, we show up at the hospital and get a list of all the Episcopalians in the hospital that we can visit. That's not possible right now. So please, if you have a need or if you know of someone who has a need, please reach out. There's nothing we would rather do than to visit with you on the phone, by Zoom, and if possible, physically distanced for prayers, for sacramental ministry. But we can't always know what's going on in your lives or the lives of our parish. So please, 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 if you know of a need, share it. Share it directly with Suzanne or share it directly with me because we want to help care for one another. And thank you for all the work that you are doing in those unofficial ways, those friendships, those relationships that persist in our parish. You are doing the pastoral care of our parish, and we want to join you in that. So I hope you'll let us know of those needs. The last thing I want to say in terms of my report before I ask Dave to talk about budget and finances as our treasurer is to say that most of what we are doing is not only to offer these things, but also to position ourselves to begin in earnest when we are able to resume in-person work. We've spent some time and some money making sure that all the supplies are available for children, youth, and adult formation. We've continued to deepen our relationships not only in the parish, but beyond the parish so that we can tap on some folks to be a part of conferences like the Vocations Conference, TIPI speakers, and the like. We've spent some time and effort caring for our physical plant, for our buildings. You might notice a new concrete pad that has been poured between the youth building and the kitchen to help not only with handicap access, but also to help us get things in and out of the kitchen in a way without having to drag it literally through the mud. So some improvements like that put us in a good position so that as soon as we are able to come back together, we are ready to do that. So we're doing all of our work to position ourselves to take advantage of the chance to come back together when that is possible. You might not see it, you might not hear about it, but the staff of your church, our staff, are working really, really hard, harder than we've ever worked before to do as much as we've done, and in some ways to do more than we've ever done. We aren't able to share that with you in person, and all of us feel that diminution in our ministry and our work. But we do it because we love our church, because we love God, because we love Jesus, and because together we are able to be a church that explores and celebrates that infinite love that God has for us and for the whole world. It's a privilege to be your rector. It's a privilege to be here at St. Paul's, and I'm delighted. I'm delighted to share ministry with you all. Any questions for me? The Q&A feature is the best way to respond with questions. Any questions for me about the ministry of the parish, the direction of the parish, about anything that I've said about pandemic or the like? Anybody have any questions? As you type your questions, let me remind you that if you're watching on YouTube, we're glad you're with us, but we would love to hear from you. And in order to hear from you, we would ask you to navigate over to the Zoom webinar. There's a link in the chat of the YouTube. You can also find that link on our church's website, and that allows you to share your questions or your comments with us. Any questions or comments at all? And again, I'm going to pause for just a moment and give you a chance to share them before we move on. Any questions or comments? Your video. So as you can tell, Dave McMath is next. I see one question. Robin asks, do we give to the project of housing the homeless? We support Seven Hills and we support CEO financially. We help minister to those who present themselves on Mondays and Wednesdays for community meals. We also deliver food. A new part of our ministry in this time of pandemic has been to actually deliver food to a tent community. We've built some relationships there. So we're ministering to the homeless. In terms of actually housing the homeless, primarily we do that by supporting agencies like Seven Hills and CEO, as well as giving direct aid to individuals who are facing eviction or are behind on their rent. Some of you might know that, of course, the Federal Housing Authority has suspended evictions, but they haven't yet made provision for those landlords being paid their rent. And so as soon as that provision elapses, or perhaps has already elapsed, then those individuals are vulnerable to eviction. So we spend a lot of time and money giving direct aid to individuals. But in terms of direct housing, we typically refer people to a CEO, Seven Hills, a Salvation Army, or help with their day-to-day needs. That's a good question, Robin, and I hope I've done a good job of answering it. Any other questions? All right. Well, let me mute myself and stop my video and turn it over to Dave, who will talk to us a little bit about our finances. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate you being with us.
All right. Hello, I'm Dave McMath. I'm the treasurer of St. Paul's, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our finances for 2020 and 2021. Ordinarily, I would expect people to interrupt me. I'm going to do my best to go slowly and anticipate questions, but if you have questions, then please use the Q&A feature, and we'll get to them when I can. Okay. All right. This is the most text-heavy of my slides for today. In 2020, pledges were below budget, but also our expenses were pretty far below budget as well. So overall, we came out even. In April, we received a Paycheck Protection Program loan from the government that helped with our cash flow. The vestry was committed from the very beginning of the pandemic to make sure we kept all staff, including part-time staff. And we really wanted to make sure that we did not become part of the problem. We're a church, but we're also an employer, and we're also a landlord. And we wanted to make sure that the people that depended on us didn't have to become more in distress than they already would be because of the pandemic in general. So the PPP loan helped a great deal. We were able to forgive rent for a couple of months in the middle of the summer. And we also, it was the case that our outreach programs gave away more money than was budgeted. As Evan mentioned, we made a point of taking the money that we had been given and giving it back to people who needed it. Also in November, we had a major activity. We bought the building that had been housing the Bassett Law Firm. We have an interest-only mortgage for the next 2 years, and then we'll have to renegotiate that. But it has a slight positive impact on cash flow. This was an opportunity that came up out of the blue. The vestry's main requirement for this transaction was that it not affect our operating expenses. And we managed to come up with a model that the rent for the building will pay for the expenses and the mortgage with a slight cushion for vacancy. So I'm very pleased that we had that happen. Around Easter and then again at Christmas, but the big ones were Easter. We had a call for special offerings to help people in the community, and those were very generous, and all that money went straight back out in the community. So I'm very happy that was something that we could do this year. In the bottom, my last point, and I'll be talking about this for for the next several minutes. The vestry has adopted a deficit budget for 2021. It was a complicated year. This coming year has a lot of questions to it, but we think that we need to do some extra spending to get ourselves in a position to come back strong in 2022. And so we have a deficit budget that we hope to erase in the next year. There we go. Okay. Very briefly, this is where our money is. We have two kinds of money. We have our cash, which we keep in the Bank of Fayetteville. We have cash that we use for operating expenses. Right as of the end of December, we had $52,917 in the bank. We also have money that we keep for restricted expenses. Restrictions are things like if you give money and you say, I want this to go toward X, we put it in a restricted account and we make sure it goes toward that. So community meals, if you want to give extra or give a special gift to the respite ministry or St. Spatulas or something like that, we keep those in the same bank account, but we keep them marked as restricted so that we don't spend them. We only spend them on the things that we were asked to spend them for. We also keep St. Martin's assets because St. Martin's is now a ministry of St. Paul's. We also have 4 endowment accounts. We have 4 endowment accounts that we keep in the stock market, basically. Greg Lee will talk more about these, so I won't be too long-winded about them. But these are the balances that we had at the end of the year for our various endowments. So this slide talks about how we ended the year, how we ended 2020 in terms of our budget plan. At the top, giving was off by $70,000, which that's what happened. As Evan mentioned, it was hard for people to stay connected with the church sometimes. We did our best. People's financial situation was complicated, and so giving was down. Our reaction to that was to keep expenses down. Part of that was by necessity. We certainly didn't spend a whole lot on communion wine this year, but larger issues, we just spent the money that was given to us. One of the points that Evan makes over and over to the vestry is that there is always enough, and we always will do God's work with the resources that we have, and that was very much exemplified this year. Up at the top, there's the other income line. Was dominated by the surplus here was because of the PPP loan, and then down here on buildings and grounds, the vestry decided at the end of the year to take a project that had been, a maybe project. We had some extra funds because of the way other expenses had worked, and we decided to dedicate some money to renovate the downstairs women's bathroom in the beginning of 2022. So that money got set aside for work that will happen at the beginning of 2021. So that work will happen at the beginning of this year while the building's all unoccupied. And so that's where the building and grounds money is a little bit higher than the budget had said. Again, Greg will talk about the endowments in a little bit more detail, but this is just a before and after picture of our four endowments. The McMichael endowment is an unrestricted endowment. That money was originally given by Tippy McMichael many years ago, but whenever we receive large gifts that don't have restrictions on them, we tend to just put them in that account, which still is called the McMichael endowment, but it contains money from lots of different gifts. It began the year with just a little bit under $3 million. As part of our process, we always take a percentage of our endowment money into our operating expenses. So we dispersed $138,000 from that into our operating budget. But then because of the way the stock market performed this year, the value of the endowment still is higher than it had started. We also have another named endowment called Greg Shively, which is earmarked for supporting local nonprofits. So this is money that was given with the intention of always being distributed back out into the community. So that came into our budget, and we sent it back out to various nonprofits. We also have two other endowments which have different sets of restrictions. We didn't have disbursements from them this year, but they are growing and they're doing well. This slide talks about pledges for 2021. So a picture of our pledges are the main source of income that we have in the parish. We show this slide every year that distinguishes pledges that are from brand new families, people who have changed their pledge amounts or increased or decreased their pledge amounts, and then there are people who have stopped pledging. This happens every year. There is a star. There is the number 102 of people who have stopped pledges. This is larger than it usually is. This number is it's indicative of the challenge that people have had this year. There are many families who needed to stop giving for various reasons, and that's what it is. And so it causes a little bit of a challenge for our budget, which we'll have to work through this year. So versus 2020, our pledge promises are down $120,000 from last year, and so this is what we have to work with at the beginning of the year. And so that is how our pledge picture looks. This picture is a breakdown of where we actually plan to be spending money this year. There's a much prettier version of this online. I'm not a graphic artist, and I just copy things. So this is a breakdown. We will be spending a big chunk on building and grounds, a lot on outreach, administration, clergy, worship. A lot of these expenses here are largely people. Our largest expense category in the church is salaries, because this is a place that's run by humans to do work with humans, and this is where we focus our resources. We wrote our budget this year with an estimate, anticipating that the church will start reopening in mid-year. If it happens early, that would be wonderful. If that happens later than that, then expenses will certainly, as last year, look different than what we're planning. So my final slide, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this one, is the budget for this year. At the top line, we have the giving amount, which includes the actual pledges that people have made, plus an estimate of things like any loose plate or special offerings that people will be giving. And I want to talk a little bit about the process by which we came to propose this budget. First off, we take the pledge money the pledges that people promise to us, and we write those down. And the top part of this, the income part of this, is basically fixed. This is what we have, what we're going to be having to work with. Around October, Evan goes to all the programs in the church who will need to be part of the budget and asks them, what would you like for the coming year? And so we make a draft budget where everybody gets everything they want, and the income is what we're promised. In that process this year, we put that together, and it was about a $90,000 deficit. That's normal. People always want a lot. They want to do a lot of things. We go through a process of whittling that down, cutting expenses, compromising on where money will go, and we make a budget which is a balanced budget. This year, as part of that process, one of the things that had to get whittled down and cut from to make a balanced budget was a third full-time priest. In 2021, in 2020, Father Chuck retired. The 2020 budget had originally identified a another priest to join and help with social justice and to help with St. Martin's and do other things around the church. And that position, the position to either replace Father Chuck or to run the St. Martin's ministry and social justice, had to be removed to make a balanced budget. The vestry talked about it and decided that wasn't a compromise that we were willing to make for 2021. So we proposed for the first time in many, many years a deficit budget, anticipating hiring a third priest in July, or in the middle of the summer. The budget says July. That person would be someone coming out of seminary and would focus on the things I had mentioned. This was not an easy decision to make. A $26,000 deficit for this year is not terrible. We have enough money in the bank to manage that, but it does make it makes certain assumptions about what's going to happen for the next year. Next year, this person will be not working just 6 months; they'll be working for the full year. We really do. The vestry is making a prediction or a hope that as things return to normal, our pledge income, our income will start to increase again, and we'll get back to sort of more normal service. And with that, the budget for 2022 should be able to wipe out this deficit, and then the church will be growing again. That is my presentation. So I'm going to stop the sharing and see what questions. I'll repeat the building that we purchased. The Bassett building is in the parking lot. If you go out the Welcome Center and look to your right, that's the Bassett building. The Bassett Law Firm is still there. They have a lease with us for a year, and the building is actually cut into two pieces. It will have another tenant on the other side of it. What does parish life include? What does parish life include? You can answer. Yes.
Parish life includes Wednesday dinners, Sunday breakfasts. It includes media ministry, the live stream and that equipment. It includes our vans and our van drivers. It includes our receptions. It includes our hospitality after church. The only staff members that are included in that are van drivers and kitchen workers, but most of that is the operation of the kitchen and other fellowship activities, and some for pastoral care and for ECW. Other questions? Other questions that y'all have for Dave or for me? Any other questions at all? I'd like to say just a couple of words from my perspective about a deficit budget, but let me give space for others to ask their questions. Evelyn says thank you to staff for keeping all of us together and for the offerings that have been provided. You're welcome, and thank you for being a part of that. I'm grateful to Dave for his work as treasurer. I appreciate the clarity of his report, not only at the annual meeting, but every month when we gather at vestry and in between as well. The vestry and the finance committee, and then the vestry as a whole, as Dave said, spent a lot of time thinking about what does it mean for us to have a deficit budget. As Dave mentioned, the good news is $26,000 is about 1.5% of our total operations, which isn't all that much. And actually, a few households have reached out and turned in a late commitment, which lets us know that they intend to give. They've just kind of lost touch. So it won't be hard for us to close a $26,000 gap. But it's important for us to realize that that has profound implications for 2022 and beyond. Um, if we wanted to, we could kind of nip and tuck here and there and maybe pretend that the money in the plate would be a little more than it would and present to you a balanced budget. But I think that would undermine the importance of sharing with the parish that in order for us to be the parish that we think God is calling us to be, it requires us to stay connected and to be faithful with our contributions and our gifts. Primarily, if not exclusively, that deficit represents the cost of a third full-time priest. This is a big, vibrant parish. Suzanne and I can't, of course, do it on our own. We depend upon other people to help. We're grateful to Laura Walsh, to Kathy Corbett Welsh, to Lynn Spellman for their time in the pulpit and presiding at the altar. But we recognize we need someone not only at St. Martin's, not only leading our initiatives in the community, our initiatives for outreach, for mission, for justice, but we also need someone to share in hospital visits and home visits and teaching and preaching and all the ins and outs of the life of a priest in this place. I'm looking forward to hiring somebody in July to do that work and to share that with us. And we count on the faithfulness of St. Paul's, not only reflecting that dream, but also responding to that reality as it comes into place. But I want you to know that we thought really long and hard about that. And one member of the vestry suggested that when she initially saw the draft budget, she thought to herself, there's no way we can adopt a deficit budget. And yet the wisdom of the group made it clear that that's a reasonable risk for us to take. It's a reasonable stretch for us, that of the 100 plus pledges that were not turned in this year, but were turned in last year, that represents more than enough. Even half of that represents more than enough to close that gap, and again to close it again for 2022. So as we expect that as we come back together again and we renew those connections, that people will give. But we're counting on that. And if we don't, we'll have to make some other adjustments, as Dave said, and I say it, and I'll continue to say it. Whatever we have will be enough. It will be enough for us to do what God is calling us to do. But I invite you to join us in dreaming big and doing important work right here, right now. Any other questions for Dave or for me, or other comments that you would like to make? Again, if you're watching on YouTube, navigate over to the Zoom webinar using the link provided so that we can hear from you. Dave, I appreciate you being with us. Thank you. If other questions come up, we will share them with you. Next, I'm going to ask Greg Lee to join us. I'm going to unpanelize you. Hold on, I don't want to remove you from the meeting altogether. Dave McMath, let me see if I can do this. This is where technology fails me. Let me change role to attendee. There goes Dave. And here is Greg Lee. Greg, thank you for being with us and for representing not only yourself, but also our endowment committee. Would you please, if you're able to turn your video on and share with us, we'd love to hear from you.
Can you see me? Can you hear me? Good morning, everyone. Evan, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be a part of the meeting this morning, and I'm representing the committee. We are relatively new. This was just a recently formed committee, and I'm pleased to be a part of it. Dave did a good job in discussing the really the endowment funds this morning, so I'm not going to, that sort of takes away some of the stuff I was going to spend some time on, so that's good. And I'll be able to move more briskly and just kind of talk about the principles of the endowment. You know, as a church, we are blessed to have an endowment fund. And so the fact that this was been established, the fact that we've had generous benefactors that are current and past members of the parish that have given of their treasure and established an endowment fund, which is, as you have seen, there are several sort of sub funds, but I'll talk about it sort of generically as an endowment fund. Of course, the whole idea of endowment is you're going to invest the principal with the idea of taking over time the earnings of that principle and apply it to fund activities. So this is all about being able to fund important missions or ministries of St. Paul's. As Dave mentioned, there are a small portion of our endowment are designated funds where there's a very specific use that the benefactor, the donor, wanted to see those funds directed towards. And of course, we are faithful in ensuring that that's where the funds are spent. Other of the funds are unrestricted, giving the church the latitude to decide where those funds can be best used to support the church's mission. These funds are invested in the stock market. They're currently managed by Stephens. We've had, as Dave indicated, this particular year, we had a very good year in earnings on the funds that are invested. The church used approximately $167,000 of what would have been earnings this year disclosed out of the endowment fund, and the earnings were in excess of that. So the endowment grew, which is of course a wonderful thing. Those of us that are familiar with stocks and bonds realize that each year you're not going to have a predictable and even growth. Some years are up more than others. Every now and then you have a down year, and you have to be aware of that. So that, we look at these funds and how much you can afford to pull from the endowment with those types of thoughts in mind. For 2021, you saw the budget was looking to pull about $174,000 from the endowment fund. And historically, it's been about 10% of the budget has been funded by funds from the endowment. So it's wonderful that we have it, and it is something that we need to protect and nurture and grow. And we need to do that in a variety of ways. One of the tasks of the committee is to work with the professional investment firm to stay knowledgeable about what's going on in the markets, knowledgeable about how our funds are invested, give input where appropriate into that, keep all the finance committee and the vestry and Evan, who, by the way, participates with the committee in what's going on with regard to the funds, and also I think to champion growth. I mean, we want to be very sure our funds are invested in a very thoughtful way, a way that both offers reasonable growth opportunities and principal protection. So we have a balance of stocks and bonds, and again, try to stay knowledgeable about what's abreast in the markets and how things are going with those goals in mind. Obviously, one of the real great ways that we could grow is through the generosity of our parish members. We, the committee, would encourage everyone to think about, as you're making estate planning thoughts for the future in that regard, please consider the church and make the church a part of your estate planning, that funds that could come into the endowment will serve our parish in perpetuity. And that's one of the values of the endowment, is you treat it as a long-term fund where you're basically utilizing the earnings from the invested funds to help support the church's activity. So if you have major gift opportunities or estate planning, please think about St. Paul's and make gifts to the endowment. We have a great committee. there's several of us that are a part of that, and I say we're newly formed, and having to do things on Zoom and what have you hasn't been the best for us to be able to meet, but we have met a few times in person, and then we have been having ongoing Zoom meetings, and we have been sharing the financial progress of our endowment funds with the committee members. So with that, I would mention one last thing, and I think it probably came through pretty clearly with Dave, but there are two key ways that endowment funds are usually given over to an endowment, and that is either in a restricted or a non-restricted way. Selfishly, I believe that non-restricted gives the most flexibility and long-term the best benefit to the church. But my goodness, we welcome restricted funds if somebody has a very particular heart for a certain type of activity or mission and wants to donate funds to support that activity. My goodness, what a blessing and for the church, and we would be so thankful to take endowment funds, either restricted or unrestricted. So with that, I'll give it back over to Evan.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it. Don't go anywhere quite yet. Any questions or comments for Greg or for the committee? One question is to remind us of who is on the committee. I'm grateful to Greg Lee, but also to Connie Clark, Lloyd Swope, Julie Gerke, and Mike Hayes. That's a 5-member committee. They serve kind of staggered 5-year terms. I'm also grateful to Jim Wood, who is a parishioner and our principal account manager at Stevens. He and his team do a wonderful job of taking care of us in that way. But the 5 trustees are Greg Lee, Connie Clark, Lloyd Swope, Julie Gerke, and Mike Hayes. I want to echo what Greg said, how important it is for us to be generous, not only in an annual basis, but also through our estate. The people of St. Paul's are very generous. Our average pledge is a little over $3,500. And if any of us moved or reached a point where we weren't able to give, of course, when we die, how will that be made up? Typically, the newcomers at a church are those of us who are just starting out in our careers and might not be able to give that fully yet. How might you consider endowing your pledge? If the endowment takes about 5% of what is in the endowment every year, then that means if you give about 20 times your pledge, either through an estate gift, through a 401k, as the beneficiary of a life insurance policy, if you're taking mandatory distributions from your IRA and want to roll those over to St. Paul's, we would be grateful for that. And you could endow your pledge by making a gift of 20 times your pledge. That would ensure that in perpetuity, your pledge will be a part of the mission and life of our church. And as our budget grows, so too will, we pray, the endowment grow. So that's one thing to consider. If you've got more complicated financial circumstance, if you'd like to set up a charitable remainder trust or any other instrument to make sure that your gift honors your wishes, reach out to me, reach out to Joy Poole, our parish administrator. We'd love to talk to you about that. But we depend in part upon our endowment, but that's an important 10% of what we do as a church, and we'd love to see that grow in the years ahead as our ministry grows here in this community. Any other questions? I see a couple of questions, Greg. Let me pass these along. Shannon asked, do we manage our investment portfolio with social justice considerations? Let me start that and then hear from you, Greg. We've talked about that, and we are waiting for the time when we can come back together in person to define exactly how we want to restrict that. But that is on our agenda, that is in front of us, and we continue to talk about that. It seemed best for us to be able to do that when all the members of the committee were able to meet in person. But we've named that as an important priority as we continue to explore our relationship with our portfolio managers. Greg, anything else that you would add about that?
I've just echoed that what you have said, and say that's come from the committee, the interest in ensuring that we're taking a look at that. So rest assured that is important to us.
Thank you. Martha, Scott asks about the progress of the chapel. The renovations to the chapel, those are complete, Martha. And the only thing that's missing is our ability to meet in the chapel. That was a part of some funds that we used from last year's operating budget. Any other questions or comments for Mike, for me, for Dave, for other members of the endowment committee? Shannon, you're welcome. That is before us. Anything else for the endowment committee? Greg, I hope you'll pass along our gratitude not only to you but to the other members, and I look forward to working with y'all in the months ahead.
I think I will say this, Evan, to the parish members. Evan has been a great asset to the committee. He's very financially astute, and he's a great participant. So we appreciate his involvement.
You're kind, very kind. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna sign Greg out of his role as presenter. And let me make Mac a presenter, so that a panelist, so that he can share with us a little bit about what he sees at St. Paul's, not only this year, but the year ahead. Hold on a second, Mac, where'd you go? I wonder why I can't, there it is. All right, Mac.
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, thank you. I'm Mac Mayfield. I've acted as junior warden for the last year and moving up a notch. And I come to this meeting with great gratitude and with hope. I'm really grateful about how quickly Evan and Suzanne and the rest of the staff were able to define our new normal, as they call it, by getting virtual and by reaching out through audiovisual means. I think we've managed to maintain as much as we possibly could, and it was done quickly, so I am grateful for that. We have as Evan mentioned, we have a very generous congregation, and even without being able to meet, we have been able to continue our programs and our ministries, and I think that's so important, because we have a legacy in this community in Fayetteville and Washington County as being active and for speaking out and doing what we can to do God's work in the community. I've come face to face with that through some volunteer activities, and we've carried that legacy through this year. And it presents us the opportunity to build on it. And I think that the fact that we've bought a building that keeps us from being landlocked as we look to the future, that we have a new website. All these things indicate that we're still marching on, and the best is yet to come. And that's what I'm hopeful for as we get back to our comfortable styles of worship and our good friends. We carry on a really essential work that I'm not sure anybody else would be doing in some respects. Certainly, we have a lot to learn from the communities that are impacted, but we also have a lot to give. And I think that 2021, as we get back on the upswing and we get into the light that it's the end of the tunnel, is going to be an exciting year. So I look forward to that. I'm very grateful for the folks who served on the vestry, for Lindsay and Philip, for our good doctors, David and for Malcolm. Many thanks to Malcolm for all the sprucing up and painting and varnishing and things that have gone on, even though the building was only lightly used. And lastly, I want to say thanks for Father Chuck. I'm going to miss him. He's certainly been a highlight of my tenure at St. Paul's and before, when he was a supply priest on occasion for us at St. Thomas. So I'm looking forward to 2021. It's not just going to be better because 2020 was bad in respect. It's going to be because we carry on and do good things. Thanks.
Thanks, Mac. I'm so grateful to you, and as you say, to the rest of the vestry, and also to Father Chuck. Thank you for highlighting him and his ministry among us. He didn't want any kind of special attention. If we were able to be together in person, we wouldn't have given him a choice. We would have filled the parish hall and shown our gratitude in person. I still hope that we'll have that opportunity, and I trust that we will see Father Chuck and Betty around. But thank you, Mac, to you and for the rest of our vestry for your leadership. Evelyn shares that sentiment as well. That's all I have on my agenda for today, but let me ask you, those of you taking part in the meeting, do you have any questions? Do you have any comments? Do you have um, any concerns, any business that you would like us to consider? Please share your comments using the Q&A feature. And of course, even when this meeting ends, the conversation doesn't end. Sometimes people are surprised to know that I'm eager to hear from you. I'm eager to get a phone call, an email, a text message. Facebook isn't a great way to contact me. I don't check Facebook Messenger all that often. But certainly a text message or an email or a phone call is a good way to catch me. Suzanne shares that as well. Our whole staff wants to hear from you and wants to know how we can minister with you and to you. So please do let us know if you have any questions or concerns. Any other comments for us as we finish our time in our annual meeting today? What a strange season this is, but I'm grateful that we can hear from some of the leaders of our church and to be together, even if it is virtually. Don't forget that starting next Sunday at 10 o'clock, a vocations conference 3 Sundays in a row during the adult forum hour, and we're going to expand that hour to about a 2-hour class. 10 o'clock starting next week, a formation conference on vocation. We ask you to sign up for that. You can just show up, but we'd love to be able to communicate with you before and after that event and make sure that you have all the information you need as that starts. So do sign up for that, link available on the website or in our newsletter. I want to reiterate how important it is that you share with us any pastoral concerns that you come across, whether they're your own or members of your family, or also members of our parish family. If you know that someone is hurting, if you know that someone is alone, if you know that someone is struggling, highlight them to us so that we can respond and care for them. We're trying to stay in touch with folks, but people are slipping through the cracks and we need your help if you'll be gracious and allow us to hear from you about any needs that we have. I don't see any other business. Is there a motion that we adjourn? And a second, I hear from Mac and from Dave. Kristen shares her gratitude as well. Thank you. There's been a motion that we adjourn. That motion is not debatable. So all those in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Wherever you are, just say aye. And if you're opposed to adjourning, I hope that you will respond in the Q&A and let us know that your answer is no, so that we can hear you. Any no's? I don't see any no's. Let's close with a prayer and then we will stand adjourned. Let us pray. Gracious God, be with us in our hearts, in our minds, and in our lives. Help us see what you would have us to see. Inspire the leaders of this church, especially our vestry and our new vestry class. Fill them with your spirit. Give them courage to act boldly for the sake of your reign. Give them sensitivity to those whom they serve and the responsibilities that have been entrusted to them, and help them feel and know the love and support of this parish. And be with us all and bring us back in fellowship in person very soon. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.